Part 116. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1151. Chapter 1151. The result of being ignored by everyone. She raised her hand and beat her son hard, pulling them forward and shouting frantically, "Just be obedient. You have to live, do you understand? You can survive here. If you follow me, you will starve to death." The two boys cried even more fiercely, and there was a big commotion on the bridge for a while. The village chief and others frowned, feeling uncomfortable. After all, everyone has had the same experience and everyone knows how painful it is. But they could not agree to take in the family just because they were pitiful. Since then, Broken Gold Beach is now in a precarious situation, and I don't know what will happen in the future. Perhaps it will be destroyed at any time, otherwise we cannot send all the children away. Secondly, these people escaped from the south, and there must be many more behind them. If word spread that Sujintan was going to take in refugees, I'm afraid they would all flock here immediately. It is easy to raise a dozen people in Sujintan, but raising thousands or even tens of thousands of people is just a joke. Lao Zhao gave the village chief a hand, and the few people stepped back to discuss. "Brother, this is a big deal, we can't make the decision, so we should ask the owner." "I think so too. Refugees will arrive in Zindu soon, so my family should prepare early. After all, our place is so eye-catching, and anyone with some scheming will come here." The village chief thought the same thing, so he said, "You find 2 cars, and I will take the people into the city and let them fend for themselves. We will never take them in. Then, mobilize all the people, patrol more closely, and protect the broken people. Golden Beach. I'm going to the Earl's palace right away. I won't be able to see my master's house during the day, but I'll definitely be able to do it at night. I'll be back with a message tomorrow morning." Everyone nodded and took action quickly. Soon, the 2 carriages were ready. When this family of refugees heard that Sujintan would not take them in, they cried hard and asked for more help. The village chief spoke. "Folks, it's not that we are cruel, it's actually that our place is the fiefdom of the nobles. If the nobles are not here, we are all slaves and we don't dare to make the decision to take you in without authorization. I will send you to the new capital right away. The people living in the new capital are all noble people. It is not difficult for you to survive. If any noble family is short of slaves, you will be able to settle down." After saying that, he motioned for Xiaokui and others to come forward. Xiaokui and other women had already found some old clothes and packed some leftover cakes and steamed buns from home into baskets. This family was just trying to survive, but seeing this, they no longer persisted. "Wherever you live, you live. And not only nobles live in the new capital, but also the emperor. They are the people of Tianwu. If they can't survive, they should go to the emperor." The 2 carriages stepped onto the path one after another and rushed to the new capital. The carriage of Broken Gold Beach is no different from other people's carriages, but the wooden sign hung high in front of the carriage has Broken Golden Beach engraved on one side and Li characters on the other, which is enough for everyone to distinguish. The soldiers guarding the city gate may not be successful in fighting, but their eyesight is top-notch. As soon as he saw the Li family's carriage, he immediately gave way without checking it. There was even a soldier who was willing to joke and greeted the village chief, "Uncle, are the fruits on the mountain ripe and coming to the palace to pay tribute?" The village chief waved his hand and smiled, "No, I have something to do at home, so I will go there when I have nothing to do. The fruit will not ripen for another month. I will bring you a basket then, so you can eat freshly." The soldiers naturally responded with a smile, and finally told the village chief which roads in the city were under martial law. After the carriage entered the city, it wandered around to find a quiet alley and unloaded the family of refugees. "Brothers, this is the south of the city. The most wealthy people live here. You can make a living here." The village chief uncle waved to the family, took the carriage and left. A family of refugees didn't even have the heart to return the favor, let alone chase the carriage. Because of the prosperity before their eyes, they were like mice falling into a rice vat, confused by joy. The alley is paved with blue stones, and the small courtyards with green bricks and grey tiles on both sides are neatly arranged. There are even green willow trees beside the courtyard wall. Under the tree, a few urchins in coats are holding snacks in their hands and looking at them curiously. Let alone such disaster years, even in good years, the county where this family lives does not have such peace and prosperity. Here, they will definitely survive. Not to mention how these refugees went from house to house begging for food in an attempt to find a place to stay. They only said that the village chief had arrived at the earl's mansion, but sure enough, no one from the head of the family was there. The old lady, the princess, the uncle, Mr. Wen, and Jian were all weeping in the palace. Fortunately, the uncle was afraid that something would happen in the house, so no one sent a message and left Zheng He behind. Zheng He guessed that something had happened as soon as he picked up the village chief, so he quickly asked, "Grandpa, village chief, is there something wrong? Do you need me to report to my uncle?" The village chief waved his hand, finished what had just happened, and finally said, "Zia He, I don't know how uncle is doing in the palace. This matter should not be rushed, but it cannot be delayed for too long." Zheng He often follows his uncle and is more sensitive to current affairs than the village chief. He hurriedly said, "No, village chief grandpa. We still need to tell my uncle about this as soon as possible, and we must make arrangements at home. The situation has been particularly bad recently, and a small thing may cause chaos in the world." Having said that, he stood up and said, "I'm going to find a way to send the message to my uncle. You, the old man, have a rest and can't leave at night. In case my uncle asks, I have to say a few words." "Okay, okay, you go and do your work, I'll wait at home." The village chief waved his hand quickly and watched Zheng He hurried out. Li Lao only received the news from home when he was having lunch. The little who delivered the message was with Eunuch Feng and was one of Eunuch Feng's godsons. At the beginning, Xilan Palace was sealed, and he was among them. During that time, Jiyan thought about a lot of delicious food, and everyone from Eunuch Feng to the young eunuchs took advantage of it. Moreover, the third princess never loses her temper when accompanied by good news, and no one is afraid of being beaten or scolded. Occasionally when the master is in a good mood, a large group of people will play games. It can be said that no matter how many years the young has been in the palace, those days are the happiest and happiest. So, even though Jiyan did all this without asking for anything in return, the young was still happy to provide convenience to the Li family. He was sent out of the palace by an old minister who fell ill on the prince's order. When he met Zheng He who wanted to bring a message into the palace, he took the initiative to help. "Refugees have entered the city. Suddenly I saw these 5 words written on the note sent by Zheng He. I was stunned for a moment, but then I wasn't surprised anymore. Before, he had paid attention to the people's sentiments in various places. But there are so many things happening in Zinda recently that I really can't take them into consideration. Unexpectedly, the refugees were killed like this. Logically speaking, if it hasn't rained for several months from spring to now, there will definitely be no harvests, no crops, and refugees. This is a result that any fool can predict." But the emperor was busy dying and arranging funeral arrangements, and had no time to pay attention to this. The civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty were trying to curry favor with the new prince and tried every means to send their daughter to the palace to gain power for the family. 2 updates today. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1152. Chapter 1152, Crush the illusion of beauty with one stick. Even the people of Zinda did not feel too anxious, because they were under the emperor's feet, and nothing would happen to them no matter what happened. In a disaster year, at most the well at home dries up, so you go to your neighbor's house to fetch water. The neighbor's well is dry, so go to the shared deep well at the end of the street. I'm afraid that the coming wave of refugees will be that heavy stick that wakes up all of Zindu at once. Can no longer indulge in the illusion of prosperity and peace and security for the country and the people. Mr. Wen originally went out to chat with some colleagues and wanted to hear if there was anything new recently. When he came back, he saw that Li Lao's face looked wrong, so he went over and asked a few questions. When he heard about it, his first sentence was, "Maybe this is a good thing. If there is chaos, that person will no longer have the time to think about things in the north." Li Lao nodded and responded, "It's just broken gold beach that's causing trouble. It's already very eye-catching. If someone guides us with bad intentions, the refugees will become a good knife for tearing apart homes. Fortunately, our family got the news first and made arrangements quickly." Mr. Wen instructed, "The princess still needs to come forward for family matters. She is more thoughtful." Li Lao found the young who had delivered the message before. Ji Yin saw the little with a sad face again, but he quickly recognized him and asked with a smile, "Little father-in-law, but my second uncle has troubled you to send a message again." The little blushed when he heard this. After all, it was so unkind to be so reluctant after taking someone's thank you gift. He quickly took the note from his sleeve and held it up with both hands. As the good news unfolded, he stopped smiling after just one glance, and immediately said, "Little father-in-law, please wait a moment. I would like to trouble you to run to the palace gate." After saying that, she went to find paper and pen without waiting for the little to speak. She wrote quickly and wrote a full article. She folded it and gave it to the little eunuch. After listening to the instructions, the little quickly ran away along the wall. Just then, the old lady came out of the inner hall. Seeing this, she asked, "What's wrong?" Ji Yin didn't tell the truth, and replied with a forced smile, "It's okay, Grandma. The second uncle is thinking about you, so let someone come and ask." Mrs. Li was happy that her son was filial, but she said, "He just has no need to worry. I have you by my side and the princess to take care of him, so nothing will happen." Ji Yin quickly changed his words and occasionally looked out at the scorching sun with dark eyes. Finally, it was time to leave the palace. When Ji Yin helped her grandma get into her carriage, Li Lao, Mr. Wen and Jian had been waiting for a while. Old Mrs. Li picked up the cattail leaf fan and fanned it a few times, then whispered, "It's only a few steps from Cunning Palace to the door, but I'm already sweating. I'm getting old too, and I can no longer use it." Li Lao quickly took the fan, fanned it for my mother, and coaxed, "I'm not old, I'm in good health. I've carried so many people out in the past few days, but I'm still in such good spirits. That's all thanks to the third princess and the prince. They really took good care of me." Old Mrs. Li couldn't help but sigh, "It's just the prince. After all, he grew up in our broken gold beach. But the princess looks like she has a bad temper, but she is actually kind. He is also attentive and a rare good boy." By now, the carriage had begun to move, and Ji Yin poured herbal tea from the teapot to everyone. The old lady saw that her son, grandson, and Mr. Wen were there, and then she came to her senses and asked, "Why are you all crowded into the same carriage?" Li Lao had no choice but to whisper, "Mom, natural disasters keep coming. The refugees from the south have arrived outside Zindu. The place where our house is too eye-catching. I'm afraid we have to go back together to find a solution." Seeing her grandma's expression change, Ji Yin quickly said, "Grandma, I've made the arrangements. Let's talk about it when we get home and discuss anything inappropriate." "Okay, okay." Mrs. Li grabbed her granddaughter's hand with a complicated expression. The Li family was born in fleeing famine, and they know what it's like to flee famine. I didn't expect that after more than 10 years of good life, I would now have to run away from home again. It's just that this time people are fleeing from famine, and they have to defend their territory from being implicated and harmed. The carriage quickly arrived outside the Earl's mansion, and Chungziu heard the news and picked it up. Wan'er hurriedly left with the child in her arms, and took Wan Qiu to take care of her. Chungziu stayed behind to guard the Earl's mansion, but she did her duty well. As soon as everyone entered the house, warm water for washing and snacks were brought to them. The village chief was restless and ran to the small garden of the Earl's mansion to look at the vegetables that had been planted. Now he is back. Everyone sat around and talked about arrangements. Ji Yin said, although we have only seen a dozen or so refugees for the time being, the drought is serious, and a large number of refugees will soon gather. When there are more people, there will be more disputes. In order to survive, the refugees will not hesitate to steal and plunder. So, previously, people had sent letters to the Lu family, Jiao family, and Xing family. There is also the academy. There are no people in the town now, and the academy is empty. It would be bad if the refugees take over it, harming the collection of books, and frightening the husband and family members. Second uncle, please come forward and send a letter to Dean Zhou if the dean feels it is necessary. He can also mobilize people from Uncle Daong to help protect the academy. I also sent someone to send a message to Uncle Daong, and he is already selecting people. More than 1,000 wounded soldiers from the Northern Expedition Army have been sent back, and it is easy to pick out 200 to 300 to use. Whether the academy needs it or not, we at Sujintan must add more people and strengthen protection. Please help me, the village chief, to make arrangements for the food and accommodation of these people. The village chief responded quickly, don't worry, princess, a lot of people have left the village, leaving a lot of places to live. As for food, I've been preparing to cook a big pot of rice recently. We can all eat together, and it will be easier to arrange things if we have anything to do. Li Laoer also responded, I will write a letter soon and ask Zheng He to make a trip. Mr. Wen frowned, took a sip of tea and said, these are all easy to say, it's just Broken Gold Beach. Everyone understood that he was talking about the mountains full of fruits, and the green vegetables crops on the ground were too dazzling. If the refugees come, it is impossible to let them go. Old Mrs. Li was very reluctant to part with it, but she still said, let's deal with everything. Sell the ones that can be sold. Give the ones that can't be sold to the victims. This can be regarded as our family doing our best to deal with this natural disaster. Think about how good it would be if someone could help us when we were running for our lives. Compare your feelings to your own, help the poor people to help the poor people. Li Laoer said quickly, don't worry, Mom, I will definitely help if I can. Our family is just to be on guard against someone with a bad conscience and inciting the refugees to be detrimental to our family. The village chief also nodded and responded, I'm afraid of this too, so I came here to ask for an idea. Everyone is living a good life now, and I'm sure they are willing to help if they can. I'm afraid that some people are not satisfied and regard the assistance as their due. In the end, we rushed into Broken Gold Beach and caused misfortune. We had good intentions but were bullied. Ji Yin saw that his words were askew, so he straightened his words again. The peaches on the mountain should be 88th ripe. Pick them and take them to the city to be sold. The shop cannot be opened, but the shopkeepers know many purchasing managers, so 1 penny is enough, and the rest are given as favors. As for those unripe fruits, squeeze the juice and add honey to freeze the popsicles, or simply sell the juice or make jam, and you can sell whatever you can. We harvest the crops in the fields as long as we can. We keep enough vegetables at home and send part of them to the military camp at the wharf, and the rest depends on the situation to help the victims. Is it okay to arrange it this way? Today's update is here. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1153. Chapter 1153, Get Busy in Advance. Everyone nodded, and after careful consideration, they found that they didn't miss anything, so they ate together. That night, good news came into the space again, and I took a thorough inventory of all the things I had saved. Especially food and other food items, and then I feel much more at ease. She probably was a hamster in her last life, and the habit of hoarding things seemed to be engraved in her bones. Not to mention all these years, the gold and silver jewelry and good things, grains, medicinal materials and fruits she had saved were the sauce jars she had put into her space before escaping from Junyang County. They are still lined up against the wall, and they have never been seen. Been abandoned. Fortunately, there are no mice in the space, otherwise I would be rolling around happily. Such a large, miscellaneous, and full warehouse is simply a paradise. Early on the next morning, the village chief hurried back to Broken Gold Beach. Shui Yun also went to find Peng Chuan, Chen 11 and others. Zheng He even rushed to Luoan Academy last night. The villagers almost broke their necks. They finally waited for the village chief to come back and immediately surrounded him. The village chief issued the order directly without explaining a word. Hurry up and pick the fruits on the mountains. The city has made arrangements to send more than half of them there. All the crops in the fields can be harvested, and orders were issued one after another, and the villagers dispersed with a roar after asking and understanding. Everyone, old or young, who could move their legs, got busy. I don't care whether it's hot or not, let alone taking a lunch break. The most important thing is to quickly grab things and put them in storage. Even those who couldn't move their legs and really couldn't do heavy work gathered in the big kitchen hall to help boil water for cooking and do the logistics work. The village chief went to look for Jing Glizheng. He didn't say much. He only said 5 words, "The refugees are coming." The hair in the scene was standing on end, and some people started to shout to the villagers to clean up things in the fields. The villagers from the other 2 villages came after hearing the news, and soon ran away as if there was a wolf chasing after them. Of course, the 3 Li Zheng all know that the matter is of great importance and it is not easy to talk nonsense. So, no matter how much the villagers asked, they would only respond with curses. If you are asked to clean it up quickly. I can still harm you on purpose. It's okay if you don't clean up. You will regret it later. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Also, if you cause trouble to the village, get out of here. There will be no disobedient people left in the village. Since the words have been spoken so harshly, who dares to delay? As a result, Sujintan was so busy that there was no one idle. Similarly, the Jiao family, Xing family, and Lu family are also working hard to win over externals Wangzi and industries. The Lu family is a century-old family and naturally has a lot of wealth. Although the children and grandchildren of the Jiao family are not very promising, they also have no prodigal sons, so the family wealth saved is also considerable. However, the Xing family has a poor family background, and there is only a small village outside the city. After getting the news, the first thing the 3 families did was to transport all the food from outside. Pigs, sheep, chickens, ducks, etc. are slaughtered, cured, and air-dried. Half of the live fish is caught and put into the lake in the small garden, and the other half is also killed and made into preserved fish. Vegetables that can be sold are sold, and vegetables that cannot be sold are sent to the city to be dried. In short, try every means to gather food and prepare to tide over the difficulties. The Xing family and the Lu family are just reconciled, and they firmly believe in any news about the Li family. But here in the Jiao family, Mrs. Jia is the head of the family. She had an unpleasant quarrel with the Li family before, and she felt somewhat uncomfortable. After receiving the news, she tried to evade it in every possible way and made many excuses. It's not that the family doesn't have enough manpower, but it means that if we gather Zhuangzi's production at this time, we will suffer a lot. Mrsger became angry at that time. She had a quarrel with her sister-in-law and even proposed to separate the family. In the end, it was Mrsger who scolded the eldest daughter-in-law, and naturally suppressed the idea of dividing the family. Mrsger temporarily took command and showed off her talents. She took all the housekeepers and servants in the family to deal with the property in a low-key and urgent manner. The most surprising thing is Beizhu. The girl who is usually greedy and playful suddenly seems to have grown up. She carried an abacus and account books, and a maid, and stayed with her mother. Whether it was writing calculations or keeping accounts, she was competent at it and handled it properly. This received praise from the whole family and made Mrsgia extremely proud. The one who is close to vermilion is red, the one who is close to ink is black. Mrsgia raised her chin, glanced at her sister-in-law contemptuously, and said with a smile, "On weekdays, Beizhu and the princess play for a while, who wants to say a few slanderous words, as if why did the princess spoil our children?" In fact, the princess taught Beizhu a lot of skills. It's just that the orb is lazy and has no chance to use it on weekdays. Now it will add glory and glory. Mrsgia was very angry, but thinking about her son who was in the northern expedition, she endured it, and then silently hoped that the refugees would not come. She didn't know how many people thought the same thing as her. It's a pity that things in the world rarely go as expected. Jiyan and Mrs. had been crying for another day in the palace. When they left the palace, the first thing they did was to ask Shuiling, who was waiting outside. "How is it outside the city?" Shuiling's face turned red from the sun. She had been out of the city most of the time today and had just come back before her master left the palace. At this moment, she has too much say. "Princess, your guess is so accurate. There are indeed refugees coming outside the city. There are hundreds of them. In one day I rode a horse and ran south for dozens of miles, and there are still many people on the road. The soldiers at the city gate stopped the refugees from entering the city. The refugees set up tents outside the city gate and were begging everywhere." Jiyan frowned and sighed softly. This is just the beginning. Hundreds of refugees gathered together and did not dare to make any noise with the gatekeepers. They could only cry and beg and compromise. But if the refugees collect 1,000, 2,000, or even 12,000, it won't look like this. Mrs. was also concerned and asked Shuiling, "How is it over there at Broken Gold Beach?" "The village chief and his people are picking fruits and harvesting the fields non-stop. I heard that they have to stay up late tonight to work, and tomorrow at the latest, they won't be finished." Shuiling took out 2 half-ripe fruits from his sleeves, held them to his master, and said with a smile, "These are fruits from the mountains, they are particularly thirst-quenching." Mrs. and Jiyan quickly waved their hands. The half-red and half-green fruit looked unpalatable. Sure enough, when Shuiling saw that his master refused to eat, he brought it to his mouth, bit into half of it, and then his sore eyebrows and eyes knitted together. Orange Mrs. and Jiyan both had sore teeth and secreted saliva. In the Earl's mansion, Li Daong came back for a rare occasion. After finally waiting for everyone in the Li family to come back, he hurriedly said, "I have mobilized 200 wounded soldiers in the camp, all of whom are capable. 50 people were sent to Luoan and handed over. I gave it to Dinjo, and the remaining 150 have already arrived at Broken Gold Beach. I see that the situation outside the city is not good. Don't leave the city easily in the future. Even if you want to leave the city, you must bring more people." Li Lao took him to sit down and drink tea. Old Mrs. also asked for help. Sometimes she touched her clothes, and sometimes she looked at him to see if he had lost weight. She treated Li Daong like a child. Li Daong felt funny and felt warm in his heart, so he talked to the old lady for a long time. When he found out that there was nothing else to do at home, he was anxious to return to the dock. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1154. Chapter 1154. I can't even make it in time to copy my homework. Old Mrs. Lee was reluctant to part with it and tried to persuade her, Daong, have a meal and then go back. I'll let Fu Niu cook your favorite dishes. Lee Daong refused and responded, Auntie, I really don't have any time this time. The Marquis is not here, and I have a heavy responsibility to guard the dock. I don't dare to be careless at all. But the 200 wounded soldiers were all returned from the Jiangbei battlefield. It's not easy, please take care of me at home. What silly words are you talking about? Old Mrs. Lee glared at him and cursed, you kid, why are you a heretic? You said we are a family, so why are you so polite? These wounded soldiers were all killed with the Marquis and the fourth son, not to mention that they came to Sujintan to protect everyone's safety even if they live in old age. That's what they should do. Don't worry, I won't treat them badly. Li Daong raised his hand and gave himself a gentle slap. He smiled and coaxed the old lady, I was stupid and made a mistake. Don't be like me. I will punish you when I come back next time to buy roast chicken for you. Everyone laughed, but Mrs. Lee patted the back of his hand and told him, it doesn't matter whether you roast chicken or not. As long as you are all safe. No one at home is with you in the military camp now. You must be very tired by yourself, but hold on. You will get better soon. When the time comes, you will be reunited with Huanayang and the children, and your days will be full of happiness. Okay, ma'am, I'm looking forward to that time too. Li Daong nodded heavily and agreed. After chatting for a few more words, he stood up and left. The city gate would be closed later. Ji Yan came over from the kitchen just in time. Shui Ling behind him was carrying 2 baskets. Seeing this, Ji Yan smiled. Uncle Daong, I guess you can't stay for dinner, so I fried some meatballs and baked dozens of pies. You take them all back and make some porridge, and that's dinner. Li Daong was not polite at all. He took it with his own hands with a smile and said, if you have anything, please let me know. After saying this, he took the people away. The defense of the wharf is important and he cannot leave anyone for a moment. If he didn't miss his family too much, he would not take the strip. After sending Li Daong off, everyone chatted about trivial matters and had dinner. The broken gold beach outside the city is still busy, with torches everywhere lighting up the interior and exterior. The produce of the mountains and fields were quickly recovered. Similarly, the same is true for the manors of the Lu family, Jiao family, and Xing family. Such a movement was quite significant, so naturally a neighboring manor discovered it and was very surprised. When we find out more, these people feel crazy again. Although the drought is severe, every manor has some backups, such as a few deep wells. Hence, the output of crops and vegetables in the manor has been reduced, but there are still 45% left. But they are not ripe at this time. Wouldn't it be a pity to harvest them back? They are reluctant to part with them. Hence, the village leaders everywhere were not in a hurry and planned to report to the owner the next day to ask what was going on. It's a pity that they don't know that opportunity is fleeting and what they fear most is waiting. In this way, some people are busy, some are watching the lively dark night, and some are running on the road or dragging their families along and insisting on moving forward. When the sun jumped out of the horizon again, the soldiers guarding the city gate looked at the number of refugees below, which had increased 3 or 4 times. They couldn't help but take a breath of cold air and almost drop the sword in their hands. The news was quickly passed in, and the commander on duty yawned and stepped forward to take a look, and was so frightened that he suddenly woke up. When did these refugees, who were in ragged clothes, sallow and skinny, with their families, looking numb and desperate, occupy most of the open space outside the city gate? When were those shabby sheds made of tree branches, broken boards, and linoleum under the city wall put up? It must be reported immediately. The commander secretly cursed himself for being unlucky for having to take the shift on this day. If he had known this, he would have been able to escape even if he found an excuse to take a few days off. Because the Queen passed away and the funeral has not yet been held, all court meetings have been suspended, but the government affairs cannot be delayed. Therefore, the imperial study room became a temporary court, and 6 important ministers gathered from time to time to discuss matters. The emperor's wife died, but he still endured his grief and dealt with political affairs, and was slapped on the back by the clever courtiers. At this time, Manager Yi took the emperor's oral instructions and ordered 5 or 6 of the crying courtiers to go to the imperial study to discuss matters. The other courtiers' eyes turned red with envy when they saw their colleagues being lazy under orders. The courtiers who successfully escaped were also proud, but unfortunately they regretted it soon. They entered the royal study, and before their buttocks could get hot, news of the city defense was reported. The number of refugees has increased rapidly and has reached 3,000. There is fear of trouble. Whether it was the emperor, the prince, or the courtiers who were full of superiority, they were so shocked that they didn't speak for a long time. Of course, even if I want to say it, I don't know what to say. Actually, this result can be considered expected, but it never happened. Everyone covered their heads and deceived themselves, stealing a few days of leisure. Now that it suddenly broke out, I really can't accept it. The emperor was the first to get angry. When did so many people gather? Why didn't they report it earlier? The commander of the city defense immediately responded, "Your Majesty, the incident happened suddenly. There were only a few refugees here yesterday. I and others stopped them from entering the city for fear of disturbing the Queen's funeral. Unexpectedly, the number of people increased dramatically overnight. Now they are all gathered at the city gate. If someone instigates a few words, it will easily cause a riot. Please tell me how to deal with it." The emperor was impatient and wanted to curse a few words, but the prince persuaded him to stop. "Father, please calm down, your dragon body is important. What has happened, and there is always a way to solve it." The other courtiers also nodded and said, "His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is right, Your Majesty, please calm down. Such a natural disaster cannot be resisted by human power." "Yes, Your Majesty. The only plan now is to quickly arrange for the refugees to avoid causing trouble. Also, how do the state capitals in the south take care of the people? So many refugees were not formed in one day. Why are there no reports from the state capitals?" The emperor rubbed his sore temples and was about to speak when Manager Yi walked in quickly. "Your Majesty, the urgent report from Southwest has arrived." Southwest. Everyone was shocked. Could it be that the foreign enemies at the southwest border had also begun to invade? The prince looked at the emperor and said nothing, so he said, "Send it up." Mr. Yi quickly raised the memorial in his hand above his head. The prince wanted to pass it to the emperor, but the emperor waved his hand. Whether he is escaping reality or being timid, in short, there are times when the leader of a country is tired, and he really doesn't want to see any more bad news. What's more, the remaining poison that could not be completely eliminated before is still slowly damaging his body. Recently, his energy has become worse and worse. The prince understood, opened the memorial and read it quickly. His face became ugly. At this time, the emperor and court officials were curious and worried. The prince is steady and rarely expresses emotion or anger. Such a change of expression shows that the matter is definitely not a small matter. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1155. Chapter 1155. Bad things happen one after another. Sure enough, the prince took a deep breath and said, "Father, this is an urgent memorial from Li Jiaran, the magistrate of Fengshan County near the southwest border pass. A Maitreya sect suddenly appeared near Fengshan, instigating and tempting the people to attack the county town, and under the guise of Kaitai, under the guise of closing the warehouses and releasing grain, he wanted to seize and plunder the city. The Fengshan County magistrate led the city defense battalion to repel the mob and captured alive a leader of the Maitreya cult. After questioning, he learned that a large number of Maitreya cult members would follow the refugees to the new capital. The Fengshan County magistrate suggested intercepting and destroying the Maitreya sect as early as possible, otherwise it will become more and more powerful and difficult to deal with. Mob. Maitreya. The emperor and the courtiers were all shocked. The emperor immediately took the memorial. A courtier next to him said in a low voice, "For some unknown reason, the Fengshan County magistrate has really neglected his duty. Why didn't he stop the Maitreya cult and instead allow them to enter the capital?" The prince glanced at the man lightly and replied, "There are only 500 city defense camps in a county. How can we protect the people and the city while also stopping tens of thousands of mobs and believers? If this gentleman has a good idea, you can write to the Fengshan County magistrate and give him some advice." The courtier immediately shrank his neck and did not dare to say anything anymore. Soon, the emperor and several important ministers had read the memorial. The emperor thought for a while and said, "The Fengshan County magistrate opened the Taipingkang in time to appease the people, gathered the people into the city, and prevented the people from being coerced by the Maitreya cult and causing chaos. This was a good way to deal with it. But treating the symptoms rather than the root cause, if left unchecked, even if the Maitreya sect cannot reach the new capital, it will definitely cause great losses to various places. Dear ladies, do you have any good ideas?" Several important ministers looked at each other, their minds empty. But they did not speak, and the emperor became angry again. With no choice, everyone could only speak safely. "Your Majesty, it stands to reason that a ragtag group of people is not enough evidence. But the large number of people coincides with a natural disaster, so we must deal with it properly, otherwise it will be easy to mess up the Tianwu Shirji." "Yes, Your Majesty, the city defense camps in various states may not be able to handle it, so they still need to send more troops to intercept it. Now the Northern Expeditionary Army is still in the north of the Yangtze River, thousands of miles away, and it is not easy to mobilize. There are only 10,000 people at the riverside wharf. If they are transferred, wouldn't it threaten the security of the new capital if the barbarians counterattack? Furthermore, the new capital is thousands of miles away from the southwest. Even if we deploy troops and generals, it will take half a month at that time. The Maitreya sect may have even more people and will not be able to lose its tail." Everything everyone said made sense, but it was of no use. The emperor's face became worse and worse as he listened, and the courtiers slowly stopped talking and looked at the prince pitifully. The prince felt contempt in his heart, but he still spoke to comfort him. "Father, this matter is very involved and cannot be decided in an instant. It's better to have lunch first and think of something later." "Yes, the emperor's dragon body is important. The emperor's dragon body is important." The courtiers also responded one after another, looking like they were sincerely thinking about the emperor. The emperor stood up, snorted coldly, rolled up his sleeves and went to the back hall. The prince smiled with everyone, and then followed him away. The remaining courtiers breathed a sigh of relief, and finally got together to talk secretly. "What's going on in the southern state capitals? Why didn't they intercept them and let the refugees run outside Zindu?" "Yeah, there's no news at all, and it doesn't give us any time to prepare. What else could be the reason? We were pushing each other. We all thought that someone would take care of these refugees in the next state capital, but in the end we pushed them back and forth, but no one took care of them. In the end, they all ran to the new capital. These things are really a scam. Stop talking, let's quickly send someone to take a look outside the city. Otherwise, when the emperor asks about it in the afternoon, we won't know how to respond." After a brief discussion, they arranged for their own men and slaves to go out to inquire. Actually, it's a mess outside right now. In half a day, the number of refugees outside the city doubled again, and the roads were sparse, like ants moving. It is unknown how many people were rushing towards Zindu. State capitals, counties, and towns can ignore them, but the emperor is the emperor and the head of Tianwu, and he must not watch his people starve to death. This is the voice of all refugees, and it is also the belief that supports them in walking hundreds of miles. Now that we have reached the end, the refugees are not willing to leave easily. Not allowed to enter the city gate, they followed the example of their predecessors and gathered under the city wall to build shanties. It's summer around here and there's no rain. Just put up a shelter and a whole family can stay there. As for eating, of course the first choice is begging. Everyone who enters or exits the city gate, whether they are nobles in carriages, common people walking with burdens, or even soldiers on patrol carrying swords, are the targets of their begging. In the face of hunger and death, scolding, contempt, and even kicking are nothing. Soon, it became more and more lively outside the city, with shouts and curses heard from time to time. The people in the city are also curious. From time to time they go to the city gate to have a look, and then run back to tell them something new. 5 or 6,000 people have gathered outside the city, and the city gates are blocked, making it difficult to get out. Of course, I went to see it with my own eyes. The refugees were so miserable that their clothes couldn't even cover their skin and flesh, and they were left with nothing but skin and bones. I heard that they traveled almost 1,000 miles, it's really scary. This is farther than when we moved the capital. We were living a good life, why did it suddenly happen like this? Those people are so hungry that they have big heads and small necks, they are so pitiful, what a crime. I originally wanted to steam some steamed buns and share them with these people, but the boy delivering food next door to my house said that half of his load was taken away from him, and no one could even get in. I was also scared. Forget it, let's see what the court does. Yes, there is a court, but if the court is not established, there are still those wealthy families who are giving porridge, so it is not our turn to bother. While talking, 2.5-year-old boys pushed the barrels in a wheelbarrow and walked nearby to sell. Cool and sweet juice, it's icy, one bowl will keep you from getting a heat stroke for half a month, it's 2 cents a bowl, so cheap and affordable. Everyone was so thirsty that they couldn't bear it after hearing these words, so they called for a wheelbarrow to come over, and I'll relieve my fever with each bowl. And the 2.5 young men did not exaggerate or lie. A bowl of sweet and sour juice made everyone feel chilled. So, the second bowl was quickly arranged, and some were brought home to give to my wife and children. For a time, the business next to the small wheelbarrow was booming. And there are almost more than 100 such wheelbarrows in Zindu city. All the young and old at the relief department, as well as all the business associates under the Li family's name, are the wheelbarrow owners. Not to mention the excitement that the people said, just that all the big families are also anxious to buy houses at the moment. Yesterday, the Lu family, Geo family, and others were busy packing things back, making a lot of noise, and of course everyone noticed it. Some people are confused and don't understand, some people have guessed but are reluctant to part with the things, and some people think these families are as timid as mice. As a result, they all regretted it today. Even if the refugees haven't started grabbing things, the red-eyed hungry wolves outside the manor are really scary. Almost every family immediately decided to grab it. 2 updates today. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1156. Chapter 1156. If the sky falls, everyone will die, and no one will have a better time. Sending trucks to transport food into the city in plain sight will definitely not work. but it can still be done by collecting the chickens, ducks, fish, and other items in the manor and cutting the vegetables in the fields. As a result, all the bankers became busy. The refugees were still waiting and watching, hoping that these wealthy families would be merciful and give them some food. It doesn't have to be very good, as long as it can fill your stomach and not starve to death. As a result, now that the chickens, ducks, and geese were disappearing, and the green vegetables were disappearing, the refugees could no longer bear it. At first, it was just a few hungry boys who walked along the edge of Zhuangzi's vegetable field and picked up a few half-withered leaves. However, this farmer in Zhuangzi didn't know whether he was dizzy from the sun or felt he was superior to others. He stepped forward and snatched the vegetable leaves back and cursed. "Where did you come from, little bastard? Get out of here, don't dirty our land." The refugee quickly pulled the boy back and begged with a smile on his face. "Brother, please take pity on us. Let us pick up a few vegetable leaves to cushion our stomachs and pray for our lives. We promise not to touch the good vegetables and promise not to cause trouble." It's a pity that the farmer is also a wicked man. He threw the vegetable leaves directly at his feet, crushed them again, and cursed, "Get out of here. Stop whining with me. The stench will kill me, don't dirty it. I won't even give you the leaves or the roots of the vegetables. You will starve to death. It's great to stay at home. I have to come to Zindu, which makes me have to work under the bright sun. It's a good thing if I don't give you a few kicks." The refugees all looked bad after being scolded, and they didn't dare to get angry even if they wanted to. But a few young men were really hungry. Taking advantage of the farmer's curse, they secretly grabbed 2 vegetable leaves and ran away. The banker also had sharp eyes. He immediately noticed it and swung the pole in his hand hard. The half-grown boy's legs were so weak from hunger that he couldn't run fast at all. He was knocked to the ground with blood pouring from his head. The half-grown-up mother rushed forward and started sobbing at the top of her lungs. "He's been beaten to death, he's been beaten to death, Erden, 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 help." If the banker gives in at this time, even if he doesn't call a doctor, he can just pay some food and drink and be done with it. But he just pretended to be powerful and was not satisfied yet. Even though he felt a little guilty at this moment, he was still cursing. "Why are you trying to blackmail someone? It's just a little bit of blood, but no one's dead. Get out of here, don't even think about scaring me. This is so unscrupulous." The child's father finally got angry and slapped him. "I'll beat you to death for being a slut. My son was injured by you, but you still cursed me without apologizing. We are refugees, we live by begging, but we are also human beings, not your children and grandchildren." The child's father was so angry that he kicked the banker down again as he spoke. The farmer did not expect that the refugees would dare to hit him, and he did not react for a long time. He was sitting in a lowly household, at the feet of the emperor, and his master was a nobleman, yet he was beaten by a homeless man who had eaten his last meal but not yet had his next meal. At that moment he wanted to jump up and fight back. But the half-grown-up mother is still full of anger, and the mother who loves her children is almost as good as a tigress. She pounced on him directly, and stretched out her hand as soon as she pressed down on the banker. After a few handfuls, the banker's face turned into a gourd of blood. The farmer screamed in pain and shouted, "Come quickly, people, the refugees are killing people, and the refugees are robbing things. Call people quickly, report them to the officials quickly, arrest them and hang them on the wall." Other farmers working not far away saw him entangled with the refugees for a long time, and they were curious and guessed what happened. As soon as they heard that things were being robbed and people were being beaten, everyone subconsciously rushed forward with pickaxes, sickles, and other items. The parents of the half-grown boy were not fools either, so they immediately shouted to their companions, "These people are so cruel that they don't even want us to live. A few vegetable leaves will kill my son. Let's fight with them. We're not allowed to grab the vegetables, so we'll grab them. Yes, we are going to starve to death, no matter what we rob or not. We are going to die anyway, let's eat enough first. Grab his mother Hummer. The other refugees were also angry, and of course they were even more hungry, irritable, and desperate. Through this incident, everyone broke out. In an instant, hundreds of people swarmed into the vegetable field. Don't worry about radish or cabbage, just pull it out. Some people put it directly into their mouths, some put it under their armpits, and some put it in their skirts. The dealers were frightened and rushed forward to stop them after they realized what was happening. Put it down, put it all down for me. Come here, the refugees are robbing something, report it to the Yamen, report it to the Yamen quickly. Soon, the two parties clashed and fought together. There are already a large number of refugees, and they are trying to survive. And what the farmer is protecting is just the owner's things. How can he go to all lengths? The results are simply obvious. By the time the owner of Zhuangzi heard the news and arrived, the entire Zhuangzi's fields had been almost destroyed. Compared to the vegetables and other items stolen by the refugees, more were trampled and crushed. Even the potatoes and sweet potatoes buried in the ground could not be dug out at the moment, and the seedlings were pulled out like bald chickens. And the farmers either had bruises on their noses or faces, or they couldn't move their arms and legs, and they were all injured. That's not bad, the refugees rioted. The owner of Zhuangzi hurriedly asked people to tidy up the village, strengthen the protection, and then rushed back to the city to report to the official. Similarly, the rest of Zhuangzi also suffered. After all, robbing one house is still robbing, and robbing 10 houses is just using more hands. The refugees endured hunger for many days, and finally arrived at Zindu, only to be stopped outside. Being beaten and scolded every day, discriminated against and driven away, no one can swallow this breath. We are like rats crossing the street, everyone shouts to beat us. The court doesn't care, doesn't the emperor say nothing? Then grab what's his, take what's his. If the sky falls, everyone will die, and no one will have a better time. Thousands, or even tens of thousands of refugees soon turned into locusts and poured into the fields outside Zindu. Everything that can be eaten will not be spared. If someone blocks your way, let's have a fight. More and more people went to the government office to complain, and the situation outside the city became increasingly chaotic. The one who suffered the most was Zhuangzi of the Fu family of Dingbei Marquis. Although Mrs. Wen got back her dowry during the reconciliation, Dingbei Ho suffered heavy losses and did not have much property left. He even had to marry a daughter of the Jiao family to secretly supplement the family income. But over the years, Dingbei Ho has planned a lot and accumulated a lot of wealth. In the village outside the city, his family is the largest and has the most fields. Moreover, he colluded with imperial merchants and monopolized the supply of vegetables to the palace. Don't underestimate a dish. Ordinary people can buy it for a few cents at most, but if they buy it for the royal family, they can buy it for at least 1 tael of silver. Who makes the royal family noble? Green vegetables are cheap, how can they be worthy of noble people? There are more than 300 people living in Dingbei's Zhuangzi. Their task is to take care of 30 acres of vegetables, watering, catching insects and raising ridges, which is extremely meticulous. Unexpectedly, suddenly the refugees rioted and trampled Zhuangzi to the ground. The vegetables that the nobles eat are now all in the mouths of the refugees. Dingbei Ho was so angry that he couldn't even wait for night, so he pretended to have heat stroke and left the palace and rushed to Zhuangzi. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1157. Chapter 1157 The Prince's Obvious Preference. The village leader is afraid of being punished by his master, so he shirks his responsibility whenever he opens his mouth. Master Ho, it's not that my servant is not doing his best, but there are actually thousands of refugees, and I can't stop them. Moreover, there are villains who are causing trouble and deliberately harming our Zhuangzi. Over at Broken Gold Beach, they were distributing vegetables to the refugees with great fanfare. The refugees were jealous that our family didn't distribute vegetables, so they attacked Zhuangzi. It's all the fault of the Li family for being in the limelight and bringing trouble to our family. It's really abominable. Ding Beiho was naturally angry, but he didn't believe this completely. He kicked the head of the village several times, but he didn't want to see the mess on the ground, so he turned around and left. On the way, he turned his horse around and passed Broken Gold Beach in a long detour. As a result, when I turned out of the city and turned to the intersection of Sujintan, there were actually refugees queuing up. It turns out that because of their quick actions, everyone in Sujintan took back all the fields that were supposed to be harvested, leaving some green vegetables that had not grown yet and threw them in the fields. Everyone felt it was a pity. So the village chief went to the city in person to ask for instructions. It just so happened that Li Laoer was thinking about his family and asked for leave today. But the queen was not in mourning yet and it was not easy to go out and show off, so he stayed at the earl's mansion and did not return to Broken Gold Beach. Suddenly he saw the village chief coming to discuss the matter. He asked a few questions and found out that the village had enough farmland for his family to feed himself for a year, so he immediately agreed to give away the excess. So the village chief returned happily and organized the villagers to burn the big stove. All excess potatoes and intact vegetable leaves are chopped into pieces and stewed in soup, or steamed into steamed buns with a small amount of cornmeal. Finally, they were given to the homeless at the intersection, with a bowl of food and a steamed bun for each person. It's not a rich meal, but it's enough to fill the stomachs of the refugees. The refugees can receive food without having to fight or be scolded or beaten, so they are naturally very grateful. I heard that the owner who gave up food was the one who contributed corn and potatoes, and most of the people knelt down and kowtowed. In the past 10 years, they had enough to eat and clothing to eat because of corn and potatoes. Even though we are now on the verge of starving to death, we cannot forget this kindness. Everyone in Sujintan handed out steamed buns and vegetables, and casually told everyone that the fields in Zhuangzi had no more produce, and everyone who could be sent was sent. The refugees all nodded. After all, from a distance, Broken Gold Beach was indeed bare. Of course there are people who do not believe in evil but have to behave themselves. Because, the soldiers sent from the wharf military camp were divided into 10 teams, with 15 people in each team, and they were patrolling inside and outside Broken Gold Beach with waist swords at all times. Coupled with 4 small teams composed of villagers and several big dogs, the Broken Gold Beach was protected airtight. Marquis Dingbei took a few glances from a distance and heard that the refugees were extremely grateful to the Li family. He was jealous and angry. Angry that the Li family did not warn him earlier, which caused his Zhuangzi to suffer heavy losses. I was even more jealous that the Li family had gained the gratitude of the refugees with just a few vegetable leaves, and their reputation had risen to a new level. All the way into the city, he was thinking about how to vent his anger. So, under the pretext of reporting the situation outside the city, he entered the palace again. The emperor and the prince were very impatient as they listened to the courtiers continuing to talk nonsense. The emperor asked, "Can you come up with any useful solution?" The prince also suppressed his temper and asked, "There are so many refugees, and many more are coming on the road. I don't know how many tens of thousands of people will gather in the end. If food and accommodation cannot be arranged, it will be the biggest security risk in the new capital. Once chaos breaks out, it will be difficult to control it. Moreover, there is the Maitreya cult watching behind, and they may incite the refugees to riot at any time. My lords, please work together and speak freely at this time." The courtiers are also feeling miserable. It's not that they don't want to try their best to find a solution, but they really have no other solution. That's tens of thousands of people. Who can put them in place just by talking? Furthermore, 1,000 people have 1,000 ideas, but if they say it, it doesn't work in the end, and even worsens the situation. They have no merit and become sinners. Whoever comes forward is a fool. At this time, Marquis Dingbei came back from outside the city. As soon as the news of his request for an audience came in, everyone raised their heads and wanted to hear what he had to say. The same was true for the emperor and the prince. Therefore, when Marquis Dingbei walked in, he was full of expectations, which made him surprised and excited. He was about to kneel down and salute, but the emperor stopped him with a wave of his hand and asked, "How is it outside the city? How many refugees have gathered? Is there any trouble?" The Marquis of Dingbei responded quickly, "Your Majesty, I was feeling a little uncomfortable and asked for leave to go back to see the doctor. But Zhuangzi outside the city reported that refugees were attacking Zhuangzi, so I hurried over. As a result, the refugees were really in disgrace. Hundreds of people rushed into the minister's farm, damaging the crops and vegetables, and even injuring the farmers. They were really arrogant and vicious. The law does not punish the people, and I have nothing to do. When I returned to the city, I took a special look and found that the number of refugees outside the city was about to exceed 10,000. The development was really rapid. If we don't deal with it, there will be a big disaster sooner or later. Even now, there is some chaos outside the city. The refugees are looting and looting everywhere, causing complaints from the people nearby. I don't know if these refugees will attack the city gate next." Everyone had a bad look after hearing this. The emperor and the prince were worried about their arrangements, while the other courtiers were worried about their family's property. After all, who had bought a village and fields outside the city? The family is probably going crazy with anxiety, but they have been discussing matters with the emperor and cannot get out, and news from home cannot be sent in. Dingbei Ho looked at the faces of everyone and felt happy. He felt that the time was ripe, so he opened his mouth to apply eye medicine to the Li family. He pretended to hesitate and said, "However, there are exceptions." "Exception? What exception?" Sure enough, everyone was looking at him, hoping that he would bring some good news. The Marquis of Dingbei suppressed his excitement and said, "When I came back, I passed by Sujintan. I found that the produce in Sujintan's fields was very clean. It was obvious that I had started cleaning up early and did not give the refugees a chance to plunder. It's just that Uncle Li's family was probably too busy and didn't tell everyone. Now everyone has suffered losses and hates the refugees deeply, but the Li family has provided food and vegetables to help the refugees and win their hearts. The refugees outside the city all say that the Li family is benevolent and righteous, and they wish they could respect the Li family as their ancestors." The courtiers all frowned upon hearing this, and subconsciously blamed the Li family for not sending them any news. It was too selfish. The emperor remained silent, but the prince spoke in time and responded, "It has been 2 days since the refugees appeared. Of course we don't know about it in the city, but Broken Gold Beach is outside the city and we must have a clearer view of the situation. Furthermore, the people of Sujintan village fled from the Northland and endured a lot of hardships. It is not surprising that they are a little more wary of such things than others. Now, when they give food to the refugees, I am afraid they are thinking of the hardships they had in the past. There is no need to be so exaggerated, Mr. Ho." These words were clearly biased and protective, and even though everyone was dissatisfied, they did not dare to say another word. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1158. Chapter 1158. The Crown Prince has become a prisoner. Dingbei was not convinced and his face turned red with anger. After all, he is still half of the prince's father-in-law. The prince actually favored Sujintan in front of so many people and mocked him for exaggerating the truth. He was about to speak, but the prince said to the emperor, "Father, I think Broken Gold Beach's method is good and has set a good example." The more refugees are gathering together, it's better to have people take care of them and resettle them in a unified manner than call on every household in the city to donate food and materials. Even one meal a day can help the refugees overcome this difficulty. In addition, order troops from the southwest to destroy the Maitreya section. If everything goes well, we will hear good news in half a month. At that time, we will send orders to various places to open peace warehouses to provide food for the refugees, and distribute good seeds. In this way, we can catch up with the second sowing. The prince talked eloquently and well-founded. I have to say that this is the best way at present. The emperor nodded repeatedly when he heard this, with admiration and pride in his eyes. But the important ministers had a bitter taste in their mouths, because not only had Zhuangzi suffered a loss, but they also had to donate food and materials. This was like cutting flesh with a knife, and the pain was getting worse. Of course they didn't dare to blame the prince, so they could only secretly use their eyes to cut off the culprit. Enter the palace and talk about the number of refugees and the damage to their village. Why do you have to bring the Li family with you? The eye drops were not successful, but they were dragged into the trap together. The hair on Dingbiu's hair stood on end after being beheaded by everyone, and he felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He obviously had good intentions, but why didn't it develop as he imagined? Yes, the Li family, it's all the Li family's fault. The Li family is his nemesis. As long as he encounters the Li family, everything will definitely not go well. Not to mention that here in Kyoto, they are struggling to resettle the refugees, and they are looking forward to the Queen's funeral being over soon. Just talking about the southwest border, we urgently adjusted patrols to prevent foreign enemies from coming to cause trouble, and we also had to step up our efforts to find out the foundation of the Maitreya section. We were also very busy. Fortunately, General Liu was brave and prestigious, his military advisors were resourceful, and all the defenders worked hard, so there was no trouble for a while. But this night, General Liu and his military advisor had just returned to the general's mansion from a patrol and got off their horses. Before they could enter the door, someone rushed to them and shouted, "My lord, help me!" General Liu and others were startled. The guards also raised the long swords in their hands alertly, signaling the visitors not to approach rashly. The visitor was very anxious. When he saw this, he tore off his bamboo hat and shouted at the top of his voice, "Your Majesty, this servant is Lu Feng." Lu Feng? General Liu did not react for a moment, but the military advisor recognized the person and reminded him in a low voice, "General, it is Lu Feng, the great steward who is following the prince in Xindu." Old General Lu's expression changed immediately. He was serving his son. If he suddenly abandoned his son and ran back, something big must have happened. "Come in quickly and talk." Several people quickly entered the house and went directly to the study. Lu Feng was covered in wind and sand, his clothes were dirty, and his lips were chapped. It was obvious that he had rushed back all the way and had no time to worry about food and accommodation. The military advisor raised his hand to pour tea, and General Liu couldn't help but ask, "Lu Feng, why did you come back suddenly?" "But the prince has something to do, how is he in Xindu?" Lu Feng's mouth moved, then his knees gave out and he knelt down, "Your Majesty, it's all servants' fault. They didn't take good care of the crown prince. The crown prince is under house arrest. Please save the crown prince." "House arrest?" Old General Lu's expression changed, but he still helped Lu Feng up, "Speak slowly." The military advisor also advised, "Yes, we are already home. Everything is easy to discuss." "Don't be anxious." As he spoke, he handed over the tea. Lu Feng drank a few gulps and said, "General, military advisor, the prince has never been out since he married the princess and lived in the princess's mansion. Every time I asked if I wanted to see the princess said that the prince was not in good health and needed to rest. Twice I tried to rush in, but the princess had the guards throw me out. I was really worried about the prince, so I spent a lot of money to bribe the servant in the princess's house. I heard that the prince was under house arrest in the bedroom, and the princess didn't allow him to move outside. Riri, that Riri shared a room. It was really hard to say this. Lu Feng only dared to say it when he saw that there was no one in the room. General Lu and the military advisor both thought they had heard wrong. The military advisor couldn't help but ask, "That's not right." Even if the empress did not announce her funeral secretly before, she actually passed away when the princess got married. How could the princess still be like this? It's very unfilial. Lu Feng gritted his teeth with hatred. It's more than that, military advisor. Even though there was a funeral in the palace these past 2 days, hundreds of officials and concubines came to the palace to cry. The princess was in the palace during the day and returned to the princess mansion at night, and she didn't, nor let her go. The prince. I don't know what's going on with the princess. She's so heartbroken. The military advisor thought of a possibility and looked up at General Lu. General Lu's face turned dark and he nodded and said, "We guessed it right before." The military advisor was annoyed and subconsciously yelled, "Why is the princess like this?" But after finishing speaking, he also sighed. The reason was the lice on the bald man's head. It was obvious. Lu Feng was a little surprised and looked at old General Lu secretly. General Lu snorted coldly and scolded him, "You don't have to hide it for the prince. The #1 scholar of the Li family came here a few days ago. We already know the big mistake the prince has made." Lu Feng was discouraged and sat down on the ground, extremely frustrated. "I don't know what's wrong with the prince, it's like he's been possessed by an evil spirit. I don't listen to my advice no matter what." Originally, when the prince won the title of Tan Hualang, everyone was happy except for the prince. Immediately afterwards, the emperor offered a marriage, and the prince agreed and asked his servants to prepare wedding items. But turning around, the prince no longer wanted to marry the princess, so he pretended to be ill and deceived the emperor. Fortunately, he was not discovered. Even in the palace study, on his own territory, Lu Feng still cautiously lowered his voice. Later, the emperor urged me too hard, and the prince did not dare to resist, so they got married anyway. But after they got married, they never left the princess's house again. The servant was really worried and rushed back. "Your Majesty, please think of a way. I'm so angry because the prince is under house arrest. What should I do if I get sick?" In his opinion, after saying this, the prince will definitely send someone to Zindu. But for a long time, he didn't hear any movement. When he raised his head, he saw the prince staring at him coldly. "Lu Feng, you only said that the prince was under house arrest, but you didn't say why he was so disgusted by the princess, let alone what big trouble he caused by using family members." Lu Feng shivered in shock and lay down on the ground, no longer daring to hide it. "Your Majesty, I am afraid that you will be angry and hurt your body." No, the crown prince does not want to disobey the imperial edict and cause trouble for the family, and he really likes the princess, so, old General Lu took over. He wanted to marry the princess and then bring the princess into the family. The Li family and the Marquis regarded the princess as the apple of their eye, and they would definitely not agree to the princess being a concubine, so he would move. He used secret manpower to cause trouble for the Northern Expeditionary Army and wanted to force the Marquis and the Li family to agree, right? As a result, the Northern Expeditionary Army was not affected, but the Li family and the Marquis noticed that he was doing something behind his back. And the princess also discovered his thoughts, and in the end, he became a prisoner. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1159. Chapter 1159. The greater the credit, the greater the risk. The more Lu Feng listened, the lower he lay down, wanting to crawl into a crack in the ground. What the old general said is absolutely right. This is what the prince planned to do, and this is the result. But he hasn't given up on pleading for his master. Your Majesty, the prince has been living cautiously for so many years, for fear of making the slightest mistake and causing trouble for the family. Just this time, he was young and energetic and did not think carefully. The prince will definitely change in the future. Bang! Old General Lu had already grabbed the teapot and smashed it out, shouting angrily, he still wants to change, so why should he change it? His life is about to be lost. Are you going to repent to the Lord of Hell? Lu Feng raised his head in horror, somewhat in disbelief. Although the prince loves the princess, he is now the prince's consort. As long as he treats the princess better in the future and coaxes her to change her mind and stop thinking about the princess, everything should be fine. Why can't you repent? Why will you die? The military advisor calmed the old general and now explained a few words to Lu Feng. The princess is the emperor's legitimate daughter, she is extremely noble, and she is on good terms with Princess Kangol. It is disrespectful for the prince to deceive him first. The girl he likes is the princess's best friend, which is probably what makes the princess most angry. The purpose of the marriage granted by the emperor is to win over our Lu family and secure the southwest. The crown prince is that link, but if the princess becomes pregnant and gives birth to a child, this child combines the blood of the royal family and the Lu family, and is the best candidate to inherit the military power. At that time, the prince will be useless, and he will definitely die. Lu Feng's face turned pale when he heard this, and he trembled with his lips for a long time before saying, no wonder the princess wanted to consummate the marriage with the prince regardless of the filial piety period. The slave originally thought that the young couple was fighting at the end of the bed, but he didn't expect that the princess was kill the prince's life. Old General Lu walked up and down on the ground with his hands behind his back. No matter how much he hated his son for being ignorant, he could not watch him die an untimely death at such a young age. The military advisor thought quickly and suggested, General, the Li family and the Marquis are not ruthless in their actions, and they have known each other for many years. If the prince stops provoking, they will definitely not add insult to injury. Now, as long as the third princess calms down or the emperor agrees to spare the prince's life, this matter will be over. Old General Lu nodded and responded, I still have to trouble you to go to Zindu. No matter what, I want to save that bastard's life. I will lead my people to wipe out the Maitreya sect immediately. By then, I will have some confidence in front of the emperor. Yes, General, don't worry, I'm going to pack my luggage and set off. General, please be careful. The military advisor gave a few instructions and bowed his head in salute. The old general patted him on the shoulder. He had been an old friend for many years, so there was no need to say more. Lu Feng knelt on the ground and felt uncomfortable when he saw the old general putting on his helmet again, covering his half-white hair. Children are debts. Who would have thought that the prince, who had made the family worry-free for 20 years, would make such a big mistake for the first time? Speaking of Zindu, every family knew about donating food and porridge that night. When the whole family heard about it and found out the whole story, everyone hated Dingbua so much that they gnashed their teeth. If you don't have the ability to apply eye drops, don't try your best. Now you're dragging everyone along to suffer the loss, you're really stupid. But no matter how much you scold, no one dares to take action at this time, but should respond positively. Because the emperor killed the queen mother, imprisoned the concubine, helped the prince to ascend the throne, married the princess, and then killed the queen. After a series of events, no one knows what he will do next. If you are trying to kill a chicken to scare a monkey, and you jump out and are caught at this time, you are asking for death. So, early on the next morning, the food and vegetables donated by each family were immediately received. Li Lauer was temporarily assigned to take charge of relief for the victims outside the city. The reason is simple. He has been running the city's relief department. In recent years, the lives of the elderly and children in the relief department have been getting better and better. They have no shortage of food and clothing. They can even start reading and occasionally do some small business to earn pocket money for themselves. The most important thing is that the entire Zindu will benefit from it. There is not a single beggar in the streets and alleys, and they are kept clean. There is no snow in winter, no water in summer, no fallen leaves in autumn, and no catkins in spring. Absolutely make the best use of everyone. Of course, these are small things, but really smart people know that it is not easy to do this. This is also the reason why Li Lauer holds the position of Earl without any fame and has a firm foothold in the court. Nowadays, there are many refugees outside the city. It is also necessary to arrange food and accommodation, maintain order, and finally find a way out. Li Lauer is the most familiar with this job, and it must be him. When Li Lauer was summoned to the imperial study room, he was a little prepared. After all, he had guessed it when he broke the golden beach and cooked the porridge. But when he actually heard the appointment from the emperor himself, he still looked frightened. "Your Majesty, I used to just take the old and weak women and children from the relief department to find a way out, which is really not that much of a skill now that there are so many refugees. I'm really worried." "My dear, there is no need to be modest. This matter belongs to you. I trust you. Just treat these refugees as the old, weak, women and children of the relief department. As long as you ensure that they don't cause trouble, the Maitreya cult will be wiped out and the south will be peaceful. It will be considered a success if you send them back home. When the time comes, I will remember your great contribution." Other important ministers were also afraid of taking on this hot potato, so they all began to persuade him. "Yes, Mr. Li, this matter belongs to you." Uncle Li acted cautiously and thoughtfully, and it was appropriate to appease the refugees. "Uncle Li, this is a good opportunity to share the emperor's worries. You can't postpone it?" Li Lauer sneered in his heart, but his face was still hesitant. After a long while, he responded, "Your Majesty, I am just an idle earl, and I am capable of arranging food and accommodation for the refugees. But in the hearts of the refugees, the ones who respect and trust the most are the emperor and the prince. How about this? Please work harder, Prince, and occasionally go out of the city to meet the refugees and appease the people. What do you think?" The emperor was satisfied and immediately agreed. The prince is the crown prince of a country, and such natural and man-made disasters are just what they should be. Please feel free to do whatever you want, and just discuss anything with the prince. The prince also smiled and said, "It will be hard work for Mr. Li from now on." Li Lauer saluted repeatedly, and then raised several specific difficulties, all of which were of great help in resettling the residents. The emperor and the prince immediately issued the order and were even more satisfied. As a superior, what he likes most is pragmatic ministers. You may not have enough ability, but as long as you accept the errand, you will do it wholeheartedly, which will naturally make people feel most at ease. Several important ministers couldn't explain how they felt and were a little angry. After all, they had been busy for 2 days. In the end, the favorability of the emperor and the prince was wiped away by Li Lauer. More regrets: if they had taken over the job, would they have been so pushy? But after thinking about it, they backed down again. The greater the credit, the greater the risk. Subsequently, the emperor summoned all the censors, and stopped wasting their salaries in the new capital. They all left the new capital and went south to several states to serve as inspection envoys. There are constant refugees on the road, and we cannot let them all gather outside Zindu. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1160. Chapter 1160. There is hope for survival. with each state opening a warehouse to release grain and provide local relief to the refugees. The governors of various states had previously shied away from the blame and allowed the refugees to commit crimes, temporarily suppressing them and giving them a chance to make meritorious deeds. If you keep pretending to be confused and don't care, then let's settle the accounts together in the end. Unknown whether it was a coincidence or unintentional, Mr. Wen was sent to the farthest state capital, almost close to Fengshan County. Li Lao didn't have time to talk to Mr. Wen, so he immediately left the palace and started to gather people and get busy. After all, there are nearly 10,000 refugees, just like children crying for food, their eyes are red from hunger. The longer you delay, the more danger there will be of a riot. Fortunately, the Li family lacks everything except experience in dealing with the people. In Broken Gold Beach, the village chief and the old men were chatting under the tree. I have been busy for almost 2 days, and I am really tired. I wish I could just fall on the ground and sleep. But at this moment, the fields are empty, the mountains are empty, there is no work, and everyone is not used to it. It seems that there is no place to put my hands and feet, and I can't sit still without having nails under my butt. So the men in the village came one after another, chatting with the old men, and asked to join the patrol. Uncle Village Chief, organize us into a patrol team, day and night with so much idleness, our bones seem to be getting rusty. That's right, Uncle Village Chief, I really shouldn't ask the master if there is any work in the city, it's okay to send us to help. I almost want to take away my mother-in-law's job, I have to fetch water and cook every day, it's really boring. The village chief smiled and banged his pipe and pot twice, laughing and scolding everyone. You are just scoundrels, you have to work all your life, you were so tired before and no one spoke, now that I ask you to rest, you are gibbering. Uncle Zhao and others laughed and responded. This is a good man, a man who is going through life. Yes, everyone has the best spirit, it's because of the spirit that we started from scratch and got to where we are today. That's right, who doesn't envy our days at Broken Gold Beach? In fact, it was all achieved through hard work and hard work. The men were pleased with themselves, smiling and rubbing the back of their heads. Simplicity and hard work are their best qualities. The village chief added some dry tobacco and said, I will go to the city tomorrow and ask a few more questions to see if the uncle and the princess have any plans. We feel like we are living a peaceful life in the village, but in fact there are a lot of things going on in the city, and the uncle and the princess have spent a lot of effort to protect everyone. If we can help, we will do our best to help. If we can't help, we will just stay there and don't cause trouble for the master. Do you understand? I know, uncle, the men responded quickly. The village chief nodded, and then lowered his voice and asked, don't take away the errands of the patrol. These little brothers, who are more than 100 wounded soldiers, were afraid of being disliked when they first came to our Sujintan. They only felt that they had some errands. You have the confidence to eat here, you know. I know, I know. The men hurriedly responded, giggling slightly guiltily. They only cared about their own happiness and forgot about their wounded brothers. The village does not lack this little rice and grain, but in fact it is enough to feed more than 100 wounded soldiers for free. But people like them want to be strong and don't want to sit around and eat for free. They can do other jobs if they don't patrol, but the patrolling of the wounded brothers shows their sincerity to the village. At this moment, a fast horse ran down the side road and headed straight for the village. Uncle Zhao had a good eye. He looked over and said, it seems to be Zia He. Did uncle have any orders? Everyone stood up. Soon, Zheng He came close and quickly dismounted. When he saw that everyone had bad expressions, he quickly said, don't worry, everyone. My uncle has an errand and needs your help. It's not a bad thing. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and the big stone in their hearts fell to the ground. The village chief pulled Zheng He and asked, Uncle, if you have any errands, please tell me quickly. Zheng He said, our family sent stews and pancakes to the refugees, and the emperor and the high officials in the court knew about it. The emperor ordered the families in the city to donate food and vegetables, and asked our uncle to be responsible for helping the refugees outside the city. Just take care of food and drink, and watch them not to cause trouble. That's nearly 10,000 people. I don't have enough people around me, and I can't trust anyone else, so I asked me to come back and ask the village chief for help. Relieve the refugees. The village chief and everyone were surprised, but then they became happy again. It should have been like this a long time ago. Those refugees couldn't survive in the south, so they found a new capital. It's really pitiful. Yes, when I was ladling stew for them yesterday, I wished that the pot had no bottom. There was so little food and so many people, so anxious. Now that the emperor has spoken, it's great. As long as the court provides food, let's go help my uncle. There's no need to work hard. Everyone responded one after another and was happy for the refugees. The village chief immediately discussed with Uncle Zhao and others, and finally decided that the 150 veterans would not move and would stay to take care of the village. 1/3 of the remaining villagers are left to look after the house and take care of trivial matters. 2/3 of the people, who were also strong laborers with nimble hands and feet, went to help outside the city. In less than half an hour, the villagers set out with their good things. Outside the city gate, some of the refugees who had stayed for 2 or 3 days had grabbed food and seemed to be in good condition. But the old, weak, women and children, who had neither food nor water, and were exposed to the sun, were completely unable to bear it. After all, they came here relying on the belief that they could be saved at the feet of the emperor in Zindu. At first glance, there was still no hope of survival, and many people fell. The relatives are in pain, others are saddened by the death of rabbits and foxes, and the people of Zindu look on with cold eyes. At this time, Li Lao arrived with people from the relief department. The first thing the elderly and children at the relief department did was to bang the copper basins and spoons in their hands and shout everywhere. The emperor has an order to set up a porridge shed immediately and cook porridge to feed the people. Everyone will have food soon, so hold on. Don't be anxious, don't make trouble, things will get better soon. There will be food soon. You won't be hungry anymore. Everyone is ready, we will start registering our names and where we are in a moment, and then we can get food to fill our stomachs. Cheer up, don't make any noise, wait for arrangements, and everyone can survive. The elderly and children at the relief department shouted different words, but they all had the same meaning. The refugees didn't believe it at first, but when they swarmed to the city gate, they saw carriages starting to transport pots and pans, as well as bulging bags of grain. They couldn't help but cheer, and some even hugged their family members and cried bitterly. There is hope for survival. Children from the relief department put down copper basins and spoons, put tables and chairs, rolled up their sleeves and transformed into little gentlemen again. The old people carried 7 or 8 large baskets filled with black sticks. As long as the refugees come forward to register their name, place of origin, and the number of people in their family, a lot will be issued. This is the voucher for him and his family to receive relief vegetables and porridge in the future. The refugees crowded around all the tables and chairs, eager to register earlier and get food earlier. The boys shouted at the top of their lungs, but they couldn't let the refugees line up properly. Today's update is here. End of this chapter.